If you've had any cryptid encounters that you'd like shared on here, email me at jttosstories@gmail.com. Story 1. This first story comes from a guy named Jeff Benoit. I have now had multiple encounters in the same area with the same friends. Last night, my two friends and I went out by Mount Rainier. We headed out around 6:30 p.m. and arrived at the location we normally go looking for Sasquatch, only to find people camping there. So, we headed out of there to another spot we have been. This other spot has had recent logging activities and is a muddy mess. We reach a point in the road where there are two branches shoved into the mud blocking the road. The road was bad here and that was really creepy. So we didn't continue all the way to the end of the road as we have before. Where we had come to a stop, there is another road off of that goes to the right. So we decided, let's see where this takes us and look for a place to have a campfire. Eventually, the road ends, so we got turned around, facing out, and made a fire pit. We got out the camping chairs and started a campfire. We did a few call blasts and just waited to see if we could hear anything back, and nothing. So we just hung out and were beginning to think this was just going to be a bust, and we wouldn't hear any vocalizations or tree knocks of any kind. So we decided to walk down the road from where we had come. We went far enough to be out of eyesight, and my buddy did some swoops, and we kept walking and stopped and listened. All of a sudden, I hear what, to me, sounded like a squirrel barking off to my left as we were facing the woodline. This was followed by what I can only describe as almost an eagle screeching / falcon sound that turned into this robotic sound. I don't know. I have no explanation. It sounded almost otherworldly, and accompanying it was what sounded like coyote yelps almost. I don't know. But they were close, and by close I mean 15 to 20 yards from us and coming towards us. There were at least 4 different things sounding off in unison like a chorus. We were all instantly gripped with overwhelming fear, as none of us have ever heard anything like this. Everything about them was off and intimidating. Since when does robotic, demented squirrel, bird, and coyote hang out together, coming in on people making these sounds? We began to back away and make our way back to the vehicle and campsite we had made. We were all just at a loss for words. Do we go back and try again? Are we being warned off? We are on the side of caution and head back towards the location, but never losing sight of a car or camp unlike the last time. Only until we can see around the bend where we were just standing when we first heard these sounds. We walk over there, and we are listening intently and hearing nothing. Only dead silence. Never a sound from the time we got there until that vocal chorus, I'll call it. Every time I am here, we are now stopped and shining our flashlights in that direction down the road when my friend says he sees eye shine. It's peeking around a tree and back out again. I shine my light to the same spot, and that's when I spot it as well. It's peeking from the light side and then the left side. The eye shine wasn't like a dog or a cat or deer. It was just reflecting the light, and eyes were white like our lights. There are 2 trees. I would say were about 5 feet apart and an upward angle from the ground resembling a V. As we were looking for the shine, I take notice of just how dark it is between these 2 trees, like black hole dark. And that's when I began to tell that what I'm seeing is a huge black mass. With light shining on it, there was nothing lighting in the space between and behind these 2 trees. But if you pan to other trees, you can clearly see the space behind them and between them. I know I'd heard this before on other encounters, and I'm going to repeat it, as it is the only way I can describe it. It was as though this thing was absorbing our light. I point this out, and we were all looking at this thing. So we decided, let's kill our lights and count backwards from 3. 3, 2, 1, and shine the light, and the mass just shifted slightly to the right. And now we can see just a small space between it and the tree to the left. And behind it is a tree with lighter colored bark. Just 3 seconds ago, you could see nothing, and now we see this. That's when I noticed that tree black out and reappear, then black out and reappear. The mass was shifting, left to right, left to right. Oh no. We were all thinking the same thing at this point. That is a Sasquatch, and it's rocking left to right, and is going to charge us if we don't back away. We back away slowly, and as fast as we can safely. The trees that he was standing by were bending around in the same exact location. We had just been standing at the moment we had heard those vocalizations. I know this because there was a cut down tree sticking up on the side of the road parallel to where we were looking at it. That side of the road is a downhill descent, and the other side almost vertical ascent, and this road is in between. The eye shine was at least 5 feet up as well as the shoulder because you could see an arm coming down from that area. Definitely could see that as it was rocking side to side. What's important to note is the ground those trees are coming up from is 3 to 4 feet below the road level. So that would put those eyes at around 8 feet. This thing was 4 to 5 feet wide and 8 feet tall and darker than a moonless night darkness. We hung out at the campfire a while longer while shining the light from where we are to where we were when we saw it. That is when we spot eye shine a lot lower and the black mass behind the bush as if it were on all fours watching us. Then, it's as if it dropped to its belly and thought we couldn't see it anymore. But you could. The dark mass sticking out to left and right of the brush, just really low to the ground. This thing has made its way towards us and is too close now. We shut off the lights again and turned them back on, and the mass is gone as well. No more eye shine. Just gone. Never heard a single sound as this thing moved in on us, either or when, or they, assuming there were more than one based on vocals, left. There were no roads above or below us, and not another soul out there. After that, we hung around a while longer, packed up and called it a night, and then we headed home. Story 2. When I first heard about Dogman, I sneered at the idea. So I understand the incredulity. It sounds insane to think something like that could exist. However, as I heard many stories I thought sounded pretty credible on Dogman Encounters Radio, I started to open my mind to the possibility of cryptids. The wilderness, after all, is extremely vast. This idea was reinforced when I was watching some Nature Channel and discovered that the largest living redwood tree was just discovered a decade ago in Northern California. I thought to myself, if an enormous static tree can remain undiscovered for several hundred years, certainly a mobile, intelligent being could be extremely evasive. Fast forward a couple years into my newfound fascination. One day I ran into a friend of mine, and we started chatting. She said that she was going through tough times, and she was living in a tent with her boyfriend and dog by the Rogue River in southern Oregon. She told me of strange events they were experiencing at night while sleeping in their tent. Something was coming into close proximity to their tent, making grunting and snorting sounds, and occasionally a terrifying screaming sound that she could best describe as a woman wailing in distress. Even on the occasions that they weren't hearing anything distinct, their large cane corso dog would notice a twig snap or unremarkable noise, whimper, and then belly crawl onto them and proceed to whimper and shake in terror. While this activity was mystifying to them, to me it sounded suspiciously similar to other events I've heard about. I made arrangements to go out to this property that they were staying on, right along the Rogue River, to see if I saw any strange happenings. The first night there was nothing notable. However, I did speak with one of the people staying on the property, in a dwelling closer to the front of the property's house. I asked him if he had seen anything strange on the property, and he told me that one night he had heard some kind of violent altercation occur near the river. The next day he went down to the river's edge, and on its muddy shores sounded like two beings had been scrapping it out. The ground was torn up, and it led into the river itself, leading him to believe something had killed something else and dragged it into the river. I asked him if he had any idea of what was fighting, and he had no idea, but he did mention his belief in a humanoid being that crawled on all fours. Long-limbed, gray skin, and moved extremely fast because the long length of its slender limbs. And for whatever reason he didn't elaborate on, he believed they came out of the trees and would slither down them at night. Okay, weird, I'm pretty sure this guy was under the influence of something. But I couldn't help but notice how closely his description of this thing was like the rake. And if you've heard Dogman encounters, there does seem to be some component to the story where dogmen hunt this thing. But why? The second night, I was perched on the second-story deck of the house, facing the river. The friend that brought me to the property, along with her boyfriend, had left for the night. I didn't mind hanging out on the deck, as it was a warm summer night, and occasionally I would hang out with the house tenants and come back out to observe. The rear portion of this property is about a half-acre long and narrow in its area. To the right is an empty house, and even further to the right is an old lodge or retreat from the 50s that had long been abandoned and become decrepit. To the left sat a wrecking yard separated by a 10-foot hedgerow that ran the entirety of the property down to the river. As I sat there on the deck chain smoking, I had this internal dialogue with myself and it, asking it to reveal itself to me, projecting the thought of I come in peace and please don't kill me. As I sat on the deck reading, I heard twigs snap and gentle rustling in the hedgerow, closer to the river. I stood up, gazing down at a sapling positioned closer to the hedgerow, and watched as a large silhouette appeared out of nothingness, somehow traversing a wall of nearly impenetrable hedgerow without causing a cacophony, save a snapping twig and the rustling of a few leaves, or somehow scaling down from a massive tree that sat along the river's edge. And while I could distinctly see this thing's silhouette, I was unable to make out distinctive features as it stayed just out of the illumination of the deck's nightlight, although I didn't need to see it distinctly to know what it was, as its inner-lit amber eyes were a telltale clue. No natural animal has eyes like its. Its eyes are not highly reflective like a cat's. They are literally creating light, glowing an amber color. Its eyes were separated by about 7 to 8 inches, and it stood about 7 feet tall. Simultaneously, as this entity stepped forward to make itself known, I saw at least a few set of self-lit amber eyes peering through the hedgerow in my direction. I had prepared mentally for this moment. That's why I was there. I was scared. Who wouldn't be? But my curiosity outweighed my self-preservation at that time. The feeling I had gazing down on this being can only be described as an adrenaline dump. It didn't show any aggression. It basically did what I had hoped for. It came forward and presented itself. I stood there and stared at it for what felt like 10 minutes, but in reality it was about 30 seconds, before I internally projected respect and gratuity for the encounter and turned to walk into the house. There is a second portion to this account where, at a later time, I came back to this property and saw something else emerge from under the water in the river onto the river's bank. But this account has gotten way longer than I intended already. Anyway, the whole point of this was not just to be an encounter story, but rather a query into what other people think these beings are, and why we're hearing about more encounters and greater frequency these days. My personal opinion is that these beings are interdimensional, capable of crossing the lower fourth to the upper third dimension via portals. That probably sounds pretty wacky to some, but I've been pursuing this topic for a while, and through highly correlated synchronicities and clues that just come to me randomly for the past several years, I've come to this conclusion. I feel that Earth is in a very remarkable point in time, having much to do with spiritual development and transcendence. The world is going to be thrown into chaos like we haven't seen since the last great cycle, and this dimensional crossing is part of the growing pains.